Hey, it's Ryan Speltz, your host, and welcome back to One Man's Journey podcast. Today, I am graced with the presence of Joe Irimescu, who is quite the interesting person. He's got quite a bit of a range of things that he's done in his life. My favorite being the mortgage magician, and I think even at a couple conferences, you've thrown out a couple magic tricks at the front of the stage, and I thought that was pretty different. And you say you enjoy soccer, and you're a multitude of entrepreneurs, so. Just wanted to introduce you, welcome you to the show. Thanks for being here. And basically, what I'm going to do from here is just pass it on over, and you can start telling your story. And let's talk about your journey.
Awesome, man. It's an honor to be on here. I'm excited. Hopefully, we can put some stuff together that people can take away and ends up being a positive thing for others that are viewing. So,
Absolutely. So start us from wherever you want to start, man. I mean, it's this kind of your show, so we're just going to take away some themes from what we've got in your story, and we'll go from there.
sure. July 23rd, 1982, a legend was born. No, I'm kidding. That is actually my birthday, but that was when I was born. So I've been here 41 years and I've had a very interesting life and some good, some bad. And I'll go through a lot of it today and it'll maybe paint a better picture as to how I ended up where I am. So I'm the youngest of three. Let me start there. I've got an older brother, older sister, had a mother and father that were married until I was about 14 years old and got divorced, which will play into what well, I'll tell a bit more on that in a moment. But grew up in a northern Michigan, so I was up on the greater Metro Detroit area, and I had a relatively normal family life. Again, I was the youngest, got picked on by my older brother because that's what older brothers do, right? But we all played soccer, we were all athletes, and that consumed most of my life. So when I was 14 years old, I started playing soccer over in Holland and Germany, broke my foot over there, had to come back. So my freshman year in high school, I started half the year with a broken foot and a cast, and then played soccer through that. Also played club soccer, graduated from high school, went to college, played pro after that. And then during that time frame began my journey for my actual career, my longest running career, then my second longest running career, which is, believe it or not, and if you would have told me I would be saying this 25 years ago, I thought you're out of your mind, but I've been doing professional magic for 25 years. I've been getting paid to do shows all over the world for anyone that's willing to watch. So I've got corporate events that I do. I've got private family events that I do. As you see, when I go out and do mortgage stuff, people always ask me because they know that I do some stuff and hopefully it's enjoyable. So I try and do that kind of fun stuff. But that is actually what led me into the mortgage side of things, which is what I do as my main career for about 20 years now. So it's a funny story. I went to school, University of Detroit Mercy College, and I was going to school to be a doctor. As you can probably guess from all of the titles I've thrown out there, doctor is not one of them. And I found out that chemistry, just not my friend. I just didn't get along with it, right? So I decided I'm like, I got to switch my major. I got to come up with something. I liked helping people. I was like, oh, I really enjoy counseling. And I had a counseling class. And the person that was teaching the class was the head of counseling for the entire university. She said, you would be great at this. You seem to really care about people. Why don't you switch your major over to counseling? I said, sure. I went through, I did a couple of years of that. And while I was doing that, my older brother, who was thankfully moved to a better point in his life, but at one point was a very degenerate human being and got kicked out of the house and a whole bunch of stuff. But he was working at a bank. He started out as a teller, worked his way up to be a bank manager. And he's like, hey, you need to have a job that looks good in your resume. Why don't you work at the bank I work at and just get a job as a teller? I said, sure. So I'm working part time as a teller while going to college playing soccer. And during that time frame, I ended up going through and still doing magic shows. And I had a magic show for a very small company at the time. It was their holiday party, their Christmas party. It was a company called Quicken Loans. So I walked up to a private VIP room that I'd done magic at for like 2 years. And while I'm sitting in the private room, I'm doing entertainment for people. And you hear a lot of stuff when you do entertainment. People typically want to talk about themselves and what's going on and show you how important they are, which is, especially in that setting, was cool. And a gentleman by the name of Eric King came up and he said, hey, do you know anything about mortgages? And I said, well, actually, yeah, I work at a bank and I actually started doing mortgages at the bank because I just kind of had a knack for it. And I had the most mortgages for the entire bank combined my first year of doing mortgages. He's like, okay. He's like, I'm going to give you my card. He's like, send me your resume tomorrow. He's like, this is a Saturday night. He's like, I'll get you an interview on Monday morning. And I was like, okay, sure. So I sent him the resume. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, I get an update in my calendar. Says, hey, you've got a meeting at 9 a.m. on Monday morning. I sit down on my interview. Of course, the first thing they ask me, can you show me a magic trick? Sure. So I walk in, I do magic. And as soon as I finish the magic tricks, like 15, 20 minutes later, guy's like, that's awesome. He's like, hey, we got to do the actual interview, right? And I was like, I'm ready when you are. So they end up giving me a position. I start out just again as a loan officer. I go through, get my licensing done, all my training. I hit the floor and I do really well, shockingly enough. I do really well there. And this is right before the housing crash. It's like 05, 06, right? So this is when I'm starting to get my feet in the industry, starting to understand what's going on with mortgages. And then the mortgage market absolutely falls apart, as you remember from 08, 09, right? So Tough time, tough place to be. So I had to scramble and find where to go. I stepped away because I was looking for a position that was going to make me more money. And I had a friend that was running a food distribution company in Metro Detroit. He said, I need somebody to run my sales division. You're the best sales guy I know. Like, his name is John Cole. I'm like, John, I don't know a thing about food. I don't know how to sell it. I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, doesn't matter. Just come show up, help me out. 3 years later, I'm done selling food. I get recruited to come back into the mortgage industry to start a call center, essentially, which is what I worked at before. I go in, I set up a call center, and we run it for about a year and a half. Things are going great. I'm closing 3.5, $4 million a month myself, just killing it, right? We get a sit down from one of the investors. He takes the entire branch out. He's like, hey guys, I want to let you know we really love the platform. In fact, we love it so much, Bank of Commerce Mortgage, which was our investor, wants to buy the platform and go nationwide. And I was like, that's awesome. Let's do this. Let's run. He's like, unfortunately, and I'm like, here he is. They don't have licensing in the state of Michigan to open up their retail branches for their banks, which is what they are doing everywhere else. So they can't operate in Michigan. So as effective today, we're shutting you down. I'm like, great. So I leave there. I go back to another company, get recruited from them. It's a company called Amerisafe. You ever heard of Amerisafe? Amerisafe has the largest lawsuit in mortgage industry history for things that are not good, right? Like, I'm trying to remember the exact version of what they said it was. Regardless, they got sued for hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, I didn't know this coming in the company. This happened after I was there. There was about 350, 400 loan officers doing what I do. I am number 11 in the company for sales, and I get on a phone call, and they're like, hey, everyone has to check in on this phone call. It's like when Zoom first started. We read your name off, just say you're present. About hour and a half, and it finally gets to me. I'm like, present. Another 30 minutes, they get through all the names. And they go, thank you guys for working at Amerisafe. If you're on this call, you're no longer part of the company. That was it. They fired every single person that was not in the state of Georgia, which is where their headquarters were, due to the lawsuit that was there. So once again, start out at a company, market crashes. I leave to go to a completely different industry, pulled back, go into an industry where I'm doing mortgages again. Company gets bought out from underneath me. Start with another company, killing it, and then the company basically has to shut down because they got sued into oblivion, and I have to go and figure out where I'm going again. Fast forward from there, I end up back in the mortgage side in Michigan at a different company. And it's been a few different places since then. I've now run my own brokerage. I work in the state of Florida. I got a whole bunch more stories. But that's how I got to the mortgage side of things. And it started with magic.
Yeah, that's there's the reason you're here, right?
Yes,
everything,
it's the reason I'm
everything
here.
that brought you here. I like, when I reached out to you is just knowing a little bit of your story. I didn't know all of those different things. Coming through there, for me, the biggest trend is resiliency on your part. Like, what do you think leads to your resiliency, or where do you think that was developed?
So great question, and I got to thank my late father for this. Is that I was a pretty good athlete when I was a kid. I played professional at a young age, and I won national championships. I won states. I was all state for soccer. Like I was a high performer, and part of it was I wasn't naturally gifted as an athlete, so I knew that I had to outwork everybody. That was my thing, right? I'm like, all right, so I don't necessarily have the tools. I'm not 6'4", 240 pounds lean. Like I'm a little guy. I'm 5'8", 5'9", and now I'm about 200 pounds, but at the time about a buck 60. So I knew I'd have to outwork everybody. So that was where it came from. I'm like, look, if I don't have the tools, I'm going to build out everything I can that I have control of. And part of that is your mindset, right? You get up every day, you have discipline, you show up, you do something hard every single day, whether you like it or not. You build up that mental toughness in that wall to be able to get there. So when stuff does go sideways, you go, okay, instead of complaining about it, how do we fix it? How do we move on? So I got to credit my dad for that one.
That's awesome. Yeah, and knowing that that's coming from your childhood, obviously being the third one, you probably had to build up a little bit of resiliency with the older siblings there.
Yeah.
I was the older sibling, so I know how that goes from the other side. But like, what do you think that I'm assuming, but probably not too far off of the weekly beatings and the weekly the weekly putting your face in the snow and all that stuff up there. What do you think that came out of that for you? Is that part of it as well? Just like knowing, like as a kid, you just got to show up and do be better than the older siblings.
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily a competition, but I'm a pretty competitive person, and I always wanted to be just slightly better than my brother, so that even if he could beat me up because he was 3 years older and he just was always just a little bit bigger than me because of just the growth spurts and all that, I'm like, I just want to know that I can just poke that stick just a little bit and be a little bit better than him because that's what would give me a little bit of pushback on my end. So it was constantly being resilient and then being tough, right? Like if you were the older sibling and you picked on your younger siblings, the thing they usually want is they want to get a rise out of you, and I refuse excuse to give that to them constantly. And that was my toughest. Like, no matter how much it hurt, how much it annoyed me, how much it frustrated, I built up a great wall of China you could not get through. You couldn't break me. And as much as I hated it at the time, it's bled over into my life as an adult now. And it's one of those things that I'm like, as much as it sucked doing it, I'm so glad it happened because it's made me mentally really, really tough.
Yeah, that's a big thing, and to develop that in especially in a business mindset of what you went through, right? Like, the multitude of getting established and being shut down, getting established, being shut down. I mean, if that can't phase you and you just move on to the next thing, like life becomes a lot easier on the other side of not having to worry about those things. I think that's a pretty awesome thing that you developed, over obviously a large period of time. Now, what would you, if you would credit anything to the success that you've had outside of the resiliency, what would you credit most to the success that you've had in multiple industries?
I will say that, and I'm pretty good at the things that I do in those industries. But besides that, I'm qualified to be there. But 100%, I've never gotten an opportunity without knowing someone that's given me a chance. In that, the gentleman that's Eric King. So I don't know if you know anything about who Eric King is at Quicken Loans. They have an award named after him. Like, he's a big deal, right? I had no idea who this guy was from Adam. Somebody saw something and they gave me an opportunity, and thankfully it worked out. I took that opportunity and ran with it. But I had not gotten anywhere in my life without someone giving me a chance, whether I was the most qualified, the least qualified, or somewhere in the middle. They gave me a shot to show up, and when I had that opportunity, you don't screw up, you don't mess it up. You take your shot and you do everything you can with it.
And arguably, that's a testament to you as well, though. And so, you know, a lot of people get in this situation. They say, "Well, somebody gave me a chance." Well, you had to establish the ability to get that chance. And honestly, Joe, you're one of the most charismatic people I've ever met. Like, you just have this aura about you that, like, you're easy to like, you're easy to talk to, you're easy to get along with, and like I think that plays into it too. Is that something that just comes naturally to you? Have you, like, can you point to something that's made you develop that? Like, where does that aspect of your personality come from?
Yeah, great question, and thank you, by the way, for the genuinely kind compliment. It means a lot. So I've always been I want to say nice person because that can be misconstrued as something else. I've always been a kind person, and I've always wanted to see other people succeed. That's just how I'm wired for whatever reason, and it's led to a lot of success because of that. Because I figured out if I could help other people get to their goals, there's no chance I'm not going to get to mine, right? So I like to give before I ask because I want to make sure somebody gets something where they can get to where they want to get to, and then I can hopefully find my way there as well. So, funny story. If you can't tell from how I am now, I had crippling, like debilitating anxiety when I was a kid when it came to social interactions and stuff. Like, literally couldn't talk in front of people. I would break out in flop sweat, mute, just couldn't get there, right? And I also couldn't shuffle a deck of cards. And my brother and sister used to make fun of me for it because I couldn't do it. So I was like, okay, you know what? Screw that. I'm gonna figure it out. So yeah, so when I was a kid, I used to not be able to shuffle a deck of cards, and my brother and sister used to make fun of me for it relentlessly. So I took that as a personal challenge. I was like, okay, I'm like, this is something that they're making fun of me for that I probably should know how to do. So I taught myself how to shuffle a deck of cards. Then I went, okay, well, if I can shuffle a deck of cards, I wonder if I can teach myself a magic trick. And then I taught myself a magic trick, and then another, and then card manipulation and palming and hide. So, and it led me to this path of where I am now, or how I got there, right? And it's just a wild thing. That same thing with I had debilitating anxiety. I couldn't speak in front of crowds. I would freak out, right? Couldn't do it. And so I forced myself to get out of my comfort zone and go do something that will intentionally make me uncomfortable, because I realized all the stuff I want to get to has to go through the path that's not comfortable, because comfortable, you just stay there the whole time. You have to do stuff that makes you uncomfortable to get you to a place where you can get where you want to get to.
Yeah, that's such a usable thing, a usable concept for so many people, right? Like, y you couldn't shuffle a deck of cards and now you're a professional magician. Like, it's amazing if we look back at all of these stories of people that have success, it's such a common theme. Like, a lot of people literally couldn't do anything in regards to what they're doing now, but it
Yep.
interested them or somebody challenged them on that point, and they took that and they elevated just a little bit, and then they caught interest and they caught fire and just ran with it and took off. And I think that's such a usable thing, is to be able to just put yourself in a slightly uncomfortable position. You don't have to go try to be on a stage if you can't talk in front of people, but put yourself on video, which is talking in front of hundreds of people every single time you put it out there. And it's just that little bit, and then you get comfortable with that. Well, that's how my path went. I was like, I'm not really comfortable talking in front of people. And then Next Level pulled me up in front of the stage and said, "You're going to talk in front of people." And it was just like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Now that's what I enjoy doing. And so I think that's so huge that like you can look back and go, man, like I couldn't even shuffle cards. Like that's so cool. And that it speaks to who you are as a determined person as well. Um, where do like if you would say one thing that drives you, this is an interesting question across I've asked it a few times throughout the episodes, and I ask it specifically because some people are driven by anger, some people are driven by wanting to succeed, some people are wanting to help other people, but there's a common thread that goes through all of them. So if you could say one thing that drives you to continue to get better, what would be that one thing?
Ooh, that is a great question. So I would say the thing that drives me to get better on a day-to-day basis is that I see what I could be and what my potential could be and what opportunities are out there. I realized a long time ago how short life is, and I'm like, I want to live the absolute most full life that I can live, being the happiest that I can live. That is what drives me to do what I need to do. So if that requires me to do 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day of working, which I was doing recently until about a week ago, I'm going to do it because I know that if I do this, I can get to this. And that's what I want to do. And it's not necessarily things or money. That doesn't motivate me in any way, shape, or form. I don't care about that stuff. I want to get to the life I want to live, which is safety, security, and happiness. And with whatever that takes, that's the steps I'm going to go.
And so you mentioned the 16 to 18-hour days. A lot of people on here are going to go, well, what about work-life balance? What are your thoughts on work-life balance and how do you get that established?
Great question. Let me just preface this with my lifestyle and how I live is not for everybody. I know that. I have intentionally gone out of my way. I wanted to be able to retire by the time I was 40, right? Just to put that on the background. When I was very, very young, I'm like, I want to retire by 40 because I want to be able to go live my life and enjoy. Now, mind you, I worked three jobs for most of my life. And I intentionally went out of my way to not start a family, not get married, not have a kid because I knew I would be stepping away from the things I wanted for my goals for myself. Well, here I am, 41. I could have retired. I haven't, and I'm not going to because what am I going to do with my time after working three jobs for forever? So, a work life balance for 99% of people is the right, correct move. But here's the secret that I have that people don't get. People ask me, what do you do for fun? I do magic for fun. I ran a beer pong company, the world's largest in the entire world. It's called Beer Pongers Anonymous. I left that out, but that's the world's largest beer pong company. I did that for fun, right? I bartend for fun. I run trivia for fun. I run karaoke for fun. So the stuff that I like doing, I try to figure out a way to get paid to do it. So I get paid and I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah, that what is that? The theme of Ikigai, right? Like where all of it comes together, what you enjoy, what you can get paid, what people,
Yep.
all of that. I think that's super important. And by saying that, you create your own work-life balance because you're renewed by the things that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've tried many times to go down a path where I was just doing one thing. So you've met me in person, Ryan, multiple times. I am ADHD like a son of a gun, right? Like just that's just how I'm wired. I can't just do one thing because my brain's like, there's no more dopamine there. Go find something else. So I tried to do magic full time and it was great. I made a great living, but it's hard being on all the time. Imagine speaking on camera 24/7, right? It's tough. I tried doing just mortgages. You get burnt out because there's so much other stuff to do. I ran a beer pong company. I did that for years. Trivia, right? Bartending. I figured out if I do small pieces of everything, I still get those dopamine hits. It's still fun for me. I still get to enjoy it and I don't get burnt out. But if I do just one, the way my weird brain works, it just doesn't function. But if I do more stuff than anyone could possibly do, that works for me.
Yeah, and yeah, when you say the ADHD thing, I feel like you and I can follow each other because we both are that
Yeah.
pretty much. Like, I just remember those nights at a couple of those events we were at where we're just like A, B, D, F, like all over, talking about so many different things and just having and enjoying that. Um, and I can tell just even in this, like we're burning through so many topics already. Like we're just like it's like bang, 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 and like that's just the way it works. Now, I would say that ultimately, we said, you do have the balance of that. What do you think of like for people seeking out work life balance? It's tough to get to that point immediately, right? Like you have to
Yeah.
have some kind of imbalance and just recognize that you're in a season. How would you recommend, let's say somebody's fighting with that, how would you recommend that they go about finding that for themselves?
So great question. And here's the answer that I figured out for myself. And when I have teams underneath me, people that I'm coaching or working with or managing, this is what I'll generally put out there to them. So there's two things that you can have. You can have experience and it doesn't take you as long to do the stuff you need to do, or you have to work to figure out what the experience is and it's going to take you longer to get there, right? You have to either know how to do it or you have to figure out how to do it. And so if you're in that stage where you know you're putting in 10, 12-hour days because you just don't have the experience, you haven't put the time in, you're not quite there yet, as long as you learn from the stuff you're doing, you won't ever forget about it, and you're going to get better and better and better to where you don't have to do those things. So it is a season. It does take time. It's paying your dues, right, as people say, but you have to learn your craft. You have to hit your 10,000 hours to be able to get to a point where you don't have to work. Like full disclosure, Ryan, outside of the COVID boom for, refinances and all that, if we as loan officers didn't want to work more than 20 hours a week, we could do that and be perfectly fine, right? Because we've done it long enough, you can be functional in that time frame and be okay. I don't. I can. I've done it for a while. Don't like doing that because I get into other dumb stuff when I do that. But you can do enough and still get there. But it's because I've been doing this for almost 20 years and I can get away with it. Someone that's brand new, if they did 20 hours a week, they're going to sink immediately. So you have to realize it's not always going to be that way. You got to put your time in. You got to earn your hours. You got to master your craft. And then you can slowly step away and not have to do as much.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I think, as well, is creating efficiencies in what we're doing, right? Like 5 years ago, me looking at a pre-approval application, scrambling for guidelines throughout the lists and all of that stuff and pulling all that stuff in, it's going to take me 45 minutes to an hour to do a pre-approval application. Today, I'll do it in 14 minutes unless it's a weird, a weird
Yeah.
scenario that I haven't seen, which is not very, they're few and far between at this point. And that's, I have an old mentor that was at my first company, and he always talked about, I too started in the calling realm and calling, 50 to 100 people every day on lending tree leads. And he just kept saying, just get your at bats, just get your at bats. And once you get to that solid foundation, like, yeah, there's new guidelines that come out, but when you have that base of guidelines, like, you're like, oh, that's new, that's cool. And then you absorb that, and you don't have to like fight to absorb all the other stuff. So that's that balance. When you become more efficient, that thing that used to take you an hour only takes you 15 minutes. Now you've got 45 minutes to go spend on your family or something else. Um,
Yeah.
how do you get, so obviously you're a single dude, but you've got people pulling for your time all the time, right? You do a lot of things. Mortgages, we know real estate agents are pulling pulling us. We know, borrowers are pulling us. It's just the way the industry works. How do you get time for yourself to be able to build that mindset that you said was so important?
Ooh, another great question, man. Thank you for asking. So I'm big on physical fitness, right? And part of being able to structure my day and set myself up not only physically but mentally, I have to go do something hard every day. I've said that a couple times, but part of that hard is I get up every day. It's 3 days on a weightlifting, 1 day of cardio, 3 days on a weightlifting, rinse, repeat. That's my schedule. And I typically try to do it if I can, unless something's preventing me. Like this morning, I have a BNI that I run at 7 a.m., 45 minutes away. But as soon as I left the BNI, I went to the gym. So I get up in the morning and I try and set and get all the craziness out, right? I wake up in the morning, there's a million bees buzzing around in my head. I got to get rid of that. I go to the gym, I pick up heavy circles, I put them down. That helps me feel mentally more clear, helps me physically function so I can put in the time and effort and hours I need to do that. And then I usually the night before, if not the Sunday before, I'll time block out my week as to what I'm going to be doing. Now, would I love to be able to just walk down my calendar and go A, B, C, D? Of course. That's not how the real world works, but you have to have some sort of frame and outline to make sure that you can get where you need to get to, right? If I want to get to this life, I have to be able to plan how to get there. I can't just, it's like they film a movie, right? There's a script. The actors didn't write the script, somebody else wrote it for them, but they have to read it out and they have to perform it. You have to be able to be the director, the actor, and the producer and everything else in all your life. So you got to script it out and put it together so you can structure your day and set it out for that.
So you're kind of making the calendar your leader, right? Like that's you're taking that outside of yourself and putting it into something else, and then you're like, okay, I'm required to follow that. Is that
Yep, that is correct. Basically, I look at it like this. I try and keep promises to myself all the time. If I'm going to go do something for me, I want to make sure that I show up for me, right? So imagine if you invited someone to go get coffee and they're like, be there at 9 o'clock. Great. And you show up and they're like, hey, sorry, I couldn't make it. I'll be there tomorrow. Great. Next day, they don't show up again, 9 o'clock. I'm like, what the heck? Like, third day in a row, you don't want to hang out with these people, right? Now imagine do that to yourself, right? That same feeling you're having about them, you got to show up for yourself, right? So my calendar is my accountability. If I put it in there, I'm gonna do it. Partially because I have ADHD and I can't remember five things 10 seconds down the road, and also because I'm like, okay, this is stuff I thought was important enough to put on a calendar and block out my time. I'm gonna show up for myself because I put it there for a reason. So if it's there, it has to get done.
yeah, that was one thing that I was thinking of when you mentioned that you put it in the calendar and structure it. Obviously, our brains crave structure but hate structure,
Yeah.
and Like if we're allowed, like we're not very good at managing ourselves, but if we can pretend that the calendar is our manager, we're able to make that work. I've got an app, it's called Todoist. It syncs between my phone and my computer. Everything goes in there, and it's like if I'm not checking off the boxes, I'm either like at the end of the day, if there's 5 things left, I'm either sticking around till those 5 things are done, or going, okay, these aren't important, and getting rid of them. Right? You have to get like just clear it out. I think that's super important, especially for somebody that wants to be at a high level. Like getting above the average is allowing something else to control your day that you can put the power into to control your day, and then at the end of the day you bring it back and you're like, okay, I did a good
Yep.
job today. um
Yep.
with the working out, do you think that that has led to your a lot of your mindset, or do you think that that and established after, or is there a combination of both?
I would say that honestly, it does. It's the stepping stone to get where I needed to get to, because if you can't mentally do something because you're just deficient in that area, you don't know enough, you don't have the knowledge, it's going to be very difficult for you to get there. Physically, you can always show up and do something physically, whether it's hard or not. And the harder it is, the more beneficial it typically is to you. So if you can conquer your mind in that way, where you can have that mindset where I'm gonna do it, it's gonna suck, I don't care, I'm just gonna show up and get it done. If you can do that with picking up super heavy stuff or running a really long distance or eating healthy, then the rest of the stuff becomes easy. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I pick up the phone and call somebody? That's easy, right? I just picked up 250 pounds on bench. Like, well, I'll pick up the phone. That's easy, right? So that makes everything else in my life for me simpler, because I put myself through the hard stuff. I eat the frog at the beginning of the day, and then the rest of it's all easy. It's downhill. So I don't ever seem stressed. So
Do you do any and this may happen while you're at the gym, but do you do any just like like mental reflection or mental internalization where you're just sitting in silence, or how do you attack the actual mental aspect of that?
oh man, good question. So it depends on the day and what I'm doing. So generally speaking, if I'm doing cardio, I usually will listen to podcast, or I'll listen to my church does a recording of their sermons and stuff, and I'll listen to that because it helps me kind of get centered. If I'm going to lifting heavy weights, I'm usually listening to something like, and you're gonna laugh when I tell you, it'd be like Miley Cyrus or something. Like, you think I'm in there doing hard rock? I'm like, no, I got happy stuff on, but I'm still loud, right? If I'm doing stuff like when I shower, if I'm driving, I have podcasts, I have books on tape constantly. That's my reflection. So quiet time for me, I know for a lot of people that's important. My brain is never quiet, so there's no quiet time for me. I just always have something going.
Yeah, I fully hear that. I think it's obviously it can be important to have some private or quiet time for yourself, and whether that's 3 minutes before bed or 3 minutes in the morning when you wake up before you get out of bed, or
Yeah,
even just brushing your teeth, that self reflection. But then being able to shove the good things into your brain, right? And it's really funny because you mentioned what you listen to at the gym. I'm not listening to the hard rock screamo stuff like everybody else is. I'm listening to Audible, like a book on a recording. And it's really funny because people, I've got a couple friends at the gym and they're like, what are you listening to today? And I'm like, The Science of Getting Rich. Like that's what,
yeah,
it's like a slow impending read about just making money, and it's such a, when your physical body's moving, it's such an easier way to absorb that information too.
yeah.
I think that's a key.
It almost feels like meditation at that point, because you're doing something where I don't know if this is everybody, I can personally kind of shut my brain off and still go through the motions and still do what I need to do, still get something out of it, but also still mentally be somewhere else, if that makes sense. I can disassociate and do things at once. And that's kind of my piece, right? That's like if I'm running, which is like a nightmare for me. I played soccer forever. I hate running, and I just always have. It's torture to me. So I'm like, okay, I got to go somewhere else to be able to get there, right? And that's how I do it. So
Yeah, and that harkens me to David Goggins, and in that aspect, like, he talks about feeling the pain and all of that stuff. Like,
yeah,
he's one of the best disassociated people you could ever meet in your life, right? Like you watch him run, and it's literally like if he's not talking, he's not even there, right? Like he's
yeah,
completely removed himself from his body. And that's, yeah, I associate with you saying that hardcore. Like there's times where it's just like, okay, just get through the workout because you need to get through it and get
yeah,
through the run, like that, the cardio thing that, yeah. I was a
yeah.
baseball
Like,
player and that was penalties.
yeah, prime example this morning. I went to my BNI. I got up at 5:30 this morning, drove out, did my education coordinator bit, and then I got to the gym. And I'm like, okay. And I get there and I look down. I'm like, son of a, forgot shoes. Right, I'm wearing boots because it's 40 degrees right now in Florida. I'm like, well, I got to do legs and boots today, so I did legs and boots today. So
Yeah.
people thought I
Yeah.
was crazy.
Yeah.
Just simple. Just show up, get it done.
I've done quite a few leg days in Hey Dudes for sure. That's a and with one earbud, and because you can't find the other one, just got to show up
Or
and do
it's
it.
not charged, right? Or it's
Yeah,
not charged. Yeah.
yeah. It goes brr. I'm like, damn it, lost the
Yeah.
power. Well, man, I appreciate your time today. I think there's a lot of, I mean, obviously, two ADD people going after it. We got through about 18 topics in 30 minutes, and I truly appreciate your time. And is there anything you wanted to, like, if you were to leave us with one thing, is there anything that you wanted to leave us with?
Ooh, so well, first of all, this is my cat Sam. He keeps coming into frame. So if you're wondering what that is, it's my Night Fury cat. Where'd he go? Ah, he's running away. Anyways, one thing to take away from this, I would say, how you speak to yourself makes a massive, massive difference. That's one thing we haven't talked about. You've got to be kind to yourself, even when you're having a rough day. Things aren't going the way that you're planned. You make a mistake. You screw up at work. Something goes sideways. You have to be kind to yourself because your self speak reflects in the rest of your life. You have to treat yourself well. If you take care of yourself, things tend to fall in place, and speak well to yourself. Things tend to fall in place. That's my takeaway.
I love it. That'll be a great Facebook reel or a TikTok right there at the end. I love it. So appreciate you, Joe. If you wanted to reach out to Joe, I'll make sure we can tag some of his social media stuff. Great follow. He's got some interesting stuff when he puts out some content, and just a good dude to interact with. So encourage you to reach out to him. And Joe, if there's any like what to reach out to you or get in contact with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Just straight up cell phone, man. Easy. As you saw while we were on the call, I got about 5 different calls that popped through. I kept having to shut off. So my phone rings a lot. I generally pick it up unless I'm doing stuff like this. So please just give me a holler. Happy to talk, whether it's work, personal, otherwise, man. We're here to support each other. That's what we do.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate it.